Hello, however, is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
You have a big voice now.
Oh, yours is even bigger.
Oh. Look at all these people.
Greeting
Hi.
everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Bonnie Clearwater, Director and Chief Curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami. And it's been quite a week here. Early on Tuesday, MoCA opened a wonderful new exhibition of Viola. And there were, well, this is just a fraction of the people who were there that night. I hope you all get to see the exhibition. It's in North Miami. It really is meant to be seen in a very meditative, quiet manner. So even if you are at the opening, come back because you need to see it quiet. We are very, very honored to have with us the pioneer of video art. And it's amazing to think that we are part of a historic art movement. Really, artist films, videos are from the late 1960s, 70s, and Bill Viola was there right from the beginning. And we have very limited time, so we're going to go right into it and talk about the fact that our exhibition at MoCA is the earliest work is actually one of your first works from 1977, and we also have had the opportunity to premiere a new work. So a lot has happened within those 36 years of work, especially
Yeah, I
for
lost this
technology.
and got this.
So we thought we would start, first of all, with the changes in technology and how that's impacted with your work.
Well, first I'd like to read something from one of my favorite artists who is by the name of St. John of the Cross. He was in the 1500s. And he has this to say about what we do. Human science is not capable of understanding it nor experience of describing it. Only the one who has passed through it will know what it means, though there will be no words for it. And that pretty much sums up, in my mind, what the human being is, or the task of human beings, which is to uncover the mystery which has enveloped us and continues to envelop us and has to envelop us, because that's the way creativity gets born. Creativity gets born by something that is unknown. It doesn't have a name or a face or anything, and all of a sudden someone goes in there and groping in the dark and finds something. And that has defined us since the prehistoric times. If you go back to prehistoric times and you think of what was around when those people had barely nothing. They were living in caves. They had taken out the bears, who were their biggest threat, and then they kept the bear skulls as a sign of their ability to take down the most dangerous animal in the world at that time. And then if you go into the caves, in the prehistoric caves, which are still there, places like Lascaux, what do you find there? You find two things that we still have today. One is art, because these people understood art. And they needed art because they had to have something of spiritual value that was a representation of what was out in the world, in that dangerous, dangerous place outside of the cave. So these guys went out hunting. A lot of them didn't come back. And they came into the cave, and meanwhile the shaman was staying inside the cave and painting the images of the spirit beings, the spiritual version of what was outside in the real world, in the dangerous world. And that was a really powerful thing. So the shaman was the artist. So artists are derived from shamanism in the prehistoric world. And the other thing that was there at that time was the idea of technology. And the technology that these people had were things like spears, okay? Things like rocks, which you could hone and break, and you could actually pound your food out on the ground with a rock. So these were the beginnings of technology. And so the first thing we had as human beings in the world, the very, very first thing was art and technology, which is the same thing we have today. And of course today we're super advanced with technology. But it's basically the same idea, which is to extend us out into the world, into the universe, and give us new vistas and new ideas and new thoughts to keep moving. Because it's the most important thing for human beings is to keep moving and keep going forward. And sometimes you have to go backwards, which is also very good. But I'd like to read just another quote for you. Well, let me do two, because I'll start with this one. So this is Ananda Kumaraswamy. To my mind, he was the greatest art historian for me, he's the greatest art historian in the 1900s. He was really, really an amazing person. He came from Sri Lanka, so he's a Hindu culture, and he came to America, and he became the head person in, I think it was, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and he still has his collection there. And he's a really extraordinary person on a lot of levels, because he understood art and how you deal with culture from the inside in the most beautiful way. So here's what he says about being an artist. This is my Bible, these little lines here. I think about them all the time. Anyway, so Ananda Kumaraswamy says, quote, "We must remember that all artistic operations were originally rites, and the purpose of the rite was to sacrifice the old and bring into being a new and more perfect human being." A new and more perfect human being. So he's not talking about bringing into becoming a new and more perfect car or a new and more perfect paintbrush. It's not about that. It's about you in here in the deepest way. And that's what's carried through, and that's what you'll find in art. The great, great artists have a way of going within themselves to a deep place, coming out the other side. And that is where the energy is created. And then from that, it goes and takes off into its various places and things and the kind of techniques that we all use. But it starts right inside. That really, really captivated me as a young artist, and I've never forgotten those words.
Well, Bill, it's interesting though. You could be using painting, you could be making sculpture. Why is it film and video that becomes the medium for you to bring this out?
Because it was the new thing. I was young, and my colleagues were young. I had the very good fortune of arriving on the scene at the same time that this new medium, the electronic image, video, had come on the scene as well. So I was literally born when video was born, and my colleagues had the same experience. And we all started to go forward. I mean, I'll never forget, being so young, things were new, and the painters, the filmmakers, just badmouthed us constantly. They were saying, "Oh, that's never going to go anywhere. You're never going to get anything out of that thing." And they were right. You had two. When you did video in the 1970s, you had a machine that was this big, that wide, that deep. It weighed 30 pounds. You slung it over your shoulder. You had to thread the tape on it every time you used it. And then you had to take it out, and then you had a camera which had a cable this big, a big cable like that, went out about that far. That was 10 pounds. So there you had 20, 30 pounds on your shoulder when you went out, just to take a shot. Yeah. And of course that's changed kind of dramatically, but it's been a wild ride.
But they also didn't have the editing tools that we have now. And what's amazing is the work from 1977 in the show, and you were talking about how you got those effects in the Stone Age, basically.
Well, that's true. I believe that technology was put on Earth to annoy us. Because you have such a huge, huge space inside your soul, inside your body. Everybody's in this room right now is an enormous, enormous cavern of knowledge, half of which we don't even see and we don't even recognize, but it's within us constantly. And that's who we are, really, on the deepest kind of way. And that kind of depth that's in a human being is infinite. And it's the most powerful thing on the planet when it comes together with other human beings. Because the most incredible thing about us is not the idea of individuality, of which we are now thoroughly immersed with, especially in the digital age. Everybody's doing their own thing, and everybody feels they're the center of the world, you know? And that's really kind of a weird kind of thing. But that's what's happening right now. But when you really look at us, those guys starting with those guys back in the cave, what we do best is collective energy. When you get human beings together to do something, and everybody's on the same page, whether you're in the same tribe or an entire continent, if you have the same thoughts, we can do anything. We can send a man to the moon. We can build a bridge. We can dig under the ground, under the earth. And it's really, really powerful. And art and creativity is at the bottom of all of that. I mean, those guys that launched up the first Apollo spacecraft and then came back down, and they had a big problem up there, and they almost died, and they ended up back to Earth. And they were there because they had a huge team of people around them to sort of back them up. And you know, you don't think about that, you artists out there. You know, I was the same. You know, you feel like you're in your own world. You are controlling everything. And that's really also the power of art. It comes out of one person's mind. One mind. Like, that's the narrowest thing that you can put out there, just shooting out there. And Einstein or whatever it is, Heisenberg. And then somehow that little spark comes out and starts propagating. And people hear about it all around the world. And then everybody has a car. Or everybody has a plane. You can fly to Europe and come back. You know, this is incredible what we do. And I just wish there was more connection with that, because artists have a lot to say in the world. We really do. And I think that's our power also, you know.
Well, in so many of the videos that we're showing at the museum, there is this sense of alienation and isolation of the individual figures in it.
Yeah.
At the same time, there are also actors in it, or the people in it, that at a certain juncture, they do come together. They do have a sense of communion. And at the same time, we as the viewer have a kind of empathy. Right? And that's where this connection comes in, is we have a kind of empathy with what's going on in the film.
Right.
And that's where we start losing that sense of alienation and isolation when we can empathize.
Yes.
And do you feel that that's an important part of what you do, is to be able to give the viewer that kind of experience, or do you not care about what the viewer is experiencing?
No, I care about people. I don't care about the viewer in terms of what they think about what I'm doing. That's a really dangerous road to go down.
But the experience that they're going to have.
Yeah, well, I kind of set it up, but the most important thing really, I think, and I think this is true for all of us as well, and we might not even realize it, is everything you do, you must leave something out. You know, the Japanese taught me that. When I was with my wife, Kira, who's right over there, she's essential for what I do. I couldn't do what I do without her, so you have to acknowledge her in a lot of this. But I lost my train of thought.
About learning from Japan about.
Oh yeah, so we spent a year and a half in Japan, Kira and I got a fellowship from the government. At the end of World War II, there was a lot of extra money left over, and they decided to create a friendship commission between you know, the two countries. And what happened was they started to ask artists. The first thing they did was they said, we're going to bring 5 Japanese artists to America. We're going to have 5 American artists go to Japan. And it was a really amazing idea with which to, you know, kind of have those two cultures kind of connect. And it was really amazing. And we spent a year and a half there. And I'll never forget it. And we visited amazing people, extraordinary craftsmen, doing incredible things. And we were also privilege to go into places that really were isolated and sit down with people and really talk to them. And that changed my life, that experience of being there. And one of the things I learned, this is really important. I don't know if everybody's here knows the book. It's a very, very small, very, very thin book. It's called Zen and the Art of Archery. It's not Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, so forget that. Mm-hmm. It's Zen and the Art of Archery, and it was the work of a German guy who came over to Japan. He was there to teach English right after the war to the young Asian students, Japanese students, and he was fascinated with the culture. And then he had been an archer in Germany, where he was from, and so he decided he was going to study archery there on his time off, and he got totally involved in archery, which is one of the sacred arts in Japan. And so this book, if you get a chance to read it, Zen and the Art of Archery, is extraordinary, because you realize in the end what they were doing, what the Japanese did, which was so brilliant, is they took the mind out of the equation of making things. Now that seems counterintuitive to us Europeans. That seems totally crazy. You have to have the mind so you can do everything and do all that complex kind of stuff. But they thought otherwise, because what they were after was this other kind of purity that comes from a deep engagement with your subject. So they took the mind out of the equation. That was the samurai thing, because if you're a samurai in those times, you know, the swords of the samurais were so sharp that you could put it in a flowing water, and you could take a leaf and come down, and it would slice that completely in half, just by holding it out. So they had some of the best weapons around. And they figured out, if you're going to be facing someone, an opponent, and you're looking right down death's eye, right down his sword, that you don't have any time for thinking. If you think, okay, I'm going to make the move over here that they taught me about, your head is gone, off. So what they did was they took the mind out of the equation and they put it into the heart, which is the seat of spirituality. It's the seat of knowledge in the deepest way, and it's also the seat of the emotion. So they took all of that into us and made an incredible thing. And I remember the Zen teacher we had when we were living there. It was an incredible person, Tanaka Sensei. It was unbelievable to be with this man for so many. We were there for 1.5 years with him as his pupils, and it was really a great thing. And I remember one time I was showing him some of my work, and I was, when I did this piece in such and such time, and this piece I made because it has I decided that I was going to do so and so and so and so and blah, 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 blah. And while I was saying that, he's standing right behind me, and I hear this, he was a rather short man, he was kind of really tight and small, and I kept hearing behind me, and I kept explaining my work, and then I went on to the second piece that I had up on the wall in my little house and with Kira, and then I heard, and then finally I heard, and I turned around to see what it was, and just as I was turning around, he went bang right in my forehead. And I said, I was shocked, it's like, and then I was like, I looked at him, and then he looked at me and he said, too much thinking.
Yep.
And I think that was the most beautiful thing and incredible thing anybody ever told me, because you have to get this guy, he's the clever guy, you have to get him out of the way, and you have to get the emotions, the heart in. That's the essential part. That's absolutely so backwards to European culture, but it was really profound.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the film has ended. That was behind us.
Oh,
but
okay,
can you talk about?
Maybe.
Can you talk a little about the work that we just saw?
Yeah, the name of that piece was a Quintet of the Astonished, and that was the first piece that I made in 2000. And that was instigated by the death of my father. My mother had died previously, about 8 years earlier. And so when Dad died, it was really difficult, obviously, and then you're an orphan, basically, because both your parents are gone. So it was very, very emotional, and talk about emotion coming out. It was amazing. and very difficult in that period. And this is really serendipitous. I can't even believe this. But basically, at that time, I had gotten a scholar, a scholar in residence position at the Getty Museum. And that was a really great thing because they only asked one artist a year to do that. And so I got this residency for a year, and I could come and go as I pleased. And that year, just by chance, they were studying the Passions, you know, the tears of Christ and all this idea of crying and suffering. And that's what I was doing at that time after my father had passed away. It was really so powerful. And for the first time in my life, too, I had, you know, I always had, you know, we always had home videos at home, and I had my art videos in the studio. And after I lost my father, I started bringing my home videos into my studio. And all of a sudden I realized, you idiot, you know, they're the same. Why do you put a wall up? You know, we're so good at putting walls up all the time, little boxes. That's the result of the Enlightenment, you know. I think that's one of the worst things that happened. That why would you want to put the giraffes and the hyenas and all those guys separate in little cages? Why do you want to do that? You know? That's really ridiculous. I mean, when you go out to the Serengeti, they're not sitting in cages. They're all mixing and connecting, and that's how we are now. We flow. All the flow now that was going back to the, you know, way back in China in the early days. It's all about flow, and that's what's happening right now. This medium that I work with is always described by technicians as flowing, you know. So you have flowing in your water system at home, you know. You have water rushing through the pipes, and electricity is described in the same way. Electricity is described as a fluid, and that's how you set up an electrical system. The two are the same. And it just so happens that just like the sky has electricity coming down to the ground, which can actually kill you if you're not careful, it also has, we have electricity in our bodies. We have electrical impulses in our bodies. That's how we think. That's how that allows us to move our muscles and everything. So those things are all connected. They're all the same thing.
Now, very often you use slow motion in your films. Why is that also this idea of a continuous motion? You become very aware of the continuity of moments rather than...
Yeah, I think the slow motion comes from, when I was young, I was really super shy. I was really quiet. I mean, also into university even, I was that way. And I had everything in and there's a huge inner world. I had all the stuff packed in there and didn't really let it out too much. So it kind of created this kind of space. And when I did start to come out with it and take it outside, kind of gingerly at first, and then kind of put a few more pieces out, and then I noticed people were interested in it. You know, I was kind of relieved a little bit. I felt that I needed to slow. I've always felt when I was even young that I needed to slow down what was happening. For me, the world was always happening too fast. And it just didn't seem like I could handle that. So, because I wanted to really look closely at things. And so that's what happened. I just kind of slowed everything down. And it was a real revelation, because if I go like this with my hand, like that, you can all see that, right? If I go like this, you can't see my fingers. And then you add it up, multiply it up by all these devices we have that there, and pretty soon you find that you're coming to the speed of light. That's how we're communicating today, on the speed of light. So I always felt I want to see into that deeply, and I want to slow that down, and I want to understand what that is. Who are we? You know, what does it mean to have pain? You know, what does it mean to have joy? What does it mean to have sorrow? And that's why when all the things that I make, that's why I slow them down, because the mind cannot catch up. You know, that thing I just did like that, you can't see that. That's why they have instant replays on football games, you know? And so you've got to just take that down. That's why the football games are so beautiful as ballets when they slow them down. They're extraordinary. So you can actually see what's happening that you can't see with your eye. There's so many things that we can't see with our eye. We think the eye is the main thing, the way we see the world. It's not. There's something deeper in there.
You know, Bill, one of the things, you know, this is a real good reason to see work. You know, we've been seeing one work of yours
Right.
here and one there. But one of the really things that came out to me seeing the exhibition installed
Right.
is to realize, going from work to work and space to space, how much space plays a role in your work, both in the film itself, but also the occupation of the space,
Right.
or even the fact that in this work, for instance, whatever they're responding to is happening in front,
Right.
is actually happening in our space.
Right.
And I wanted to, you know, it's one of the things I came away with seeing this exhibition.
Right.
And I want to know if you have a philosophy of space, or especially the newest work that we're premiering.
Right.
There's this very deep space that brings the figures right up to the picture plane.
Well, how much time do we have?
We have another 10 minutes.
Okay, good. Space.
The final
Well,
one.
I think I would have to say, I'd have to add another thing to that, what you just mentioned, and that would be time. I mean, space and time, as Einstein have told us, are inseparable. So whenever we talk about space, we're really talking about time. And so the space-time continuum, as it's called, is something that's very real and something that is existing right now. And space is also the thing. I mean, I did a whole study of it when I was young, and I was really fascinated with this idea that things are fluid. There's a kind of a fluidity, and things stretch and bend and move in different ways at different times. And we've just finished in this new series of works, the Mirage series, we just finished a whole study of mirages. And that's a real fascinating thing. That's a perfect example of why you can't really clearly state that this is real and this is not real. Because a mirage is real.
It's a real phenomenon.
It exists. Yes. It's caused by air heating up at the ground level, okay? So if you go out in the Mojave Desert last summer, like we did with a whole crew and a group of people and performers and stuff, I mean, that's real. You can die out there. Like, you can be gone. We had to take care of everybody so carefully. You know, we had quite a large group of performers, and if you didn't drink water regularly and you didn't put your hat on when you were out there, you could get in trouble really, really fast. And the same thing is true if you go up to the Arctic. It's the same thing. It's just the opposite. But it was really, really powerful. So we were really very carefully watching everybody. And a couple of people got a mild version of a heat stroke, and we kind of keep them inside for about an hour, hour and a half, so they could cool down. So it's a real dangerous thing in a way. But it has that feeling when you see it, it's fluid. You can sense it as water. That's why the classic thing in the movies where they're seeing a mirage and it's like water and they keep going and going and then they die because it's not really water. That's true in a way. You know, it's an illusion, but it's real. I don't believe that illusions are illusions. I think they're all real, you know? And I think this tricking the mind is something that is probably a good thing to do.
But that's what was also interesting about the Mirage. I mean, we think, you know, a Mirage is something that our mind, a kind of game that trick our minds playing with us. But you're using technology, and you know, we're told the camera doesn't lie, and that it's factual. So the fact is that the camera is actually seeing this mirage.
Okay.
And that was something that was interesting.
Okay, let me just riff on the camera doesn't lie. Okay. So I'm here. I don't have my camera with me right now, okay? But I can be here, and I could stand up like this, I could take my camera and I could do a pan of this audience right like this, okay, if I had my camera here. I'd go real slow. I'd have every one of you in the frame, and I'll have pictures of every one of you, right? And I put it down. I turn around over here, and I shoot it again, and I shoot the wall. Same thing. I do a pan from here to here without these guys, okay? So then, I can take that image that I had of the pan of all of you here at this very moment, right now. Or I could show the other one, which is the same audience in the same place behind me, and no one would know that any of you exist. That's why the camera is the second most dangerous thing on the planet. And that's how the media manipulates us and everything like that. The really most dangerous thing on the planet is this finger. It's actually not this finger, it's the little muscle that's right here. Because this finger, with one push of a button, can nuke St. Petersburg. Bam, it's gone, okay? It can make a young family destitute because they didn't have enough money, okay? This finger is so dangerous because we have made it from Archimedes, famous taking the big stone and pushing down with counterforce, and he can make this giant thing move. Well, we've come so far from that. Archimedes, are you there? Archimedes.
Come in.
I don't even know what this thing is.
It's technology.
Wait, I'm supposed to be a tech guy. What is this? Okay. So we have come so far from that this is really serious right now. It's very, very serious. And this is how we all get manipulated. And now that the media is here, it's even worse because that's so slippery and slimy, and you can never get to the bottom of that.
Well, I know that our audience has a lot of questions because they've been asking me individually, and rather than me give the answer, I'd rather they hear it from you. So I would like to encourage you all to ask questions. Well, we have Bill here. Anybody in the audience? Oh, okay, right here.
Okay, thank you very much for coming here and your wonderful talk. You talked about some dangers. You just talked about the danger of the media, danger of truth, the danger of egotism at the beginning. In your artistic practice, do you have artistic practices that help awaken you to those dangers, things you can share with others?
That's a very good point. I really appreciate that question. I think it comes down to honesty. And I think it comes down, most importantly, to isolation. I think isolation is the most important thing right now in the world because it's literally being taken away from us because of media, because of the very, very tools that I use, okay? And what I ask when I talk with art students, and we really talk about artistic practice, I don't give them, we don't talk about technology. I don't talk about technology. I talk about the soul, I talk about us inside at the deepest way. So I tell them, I say, when you go into your studio to make a work and you feel that little spark starting and you feel that creativity, it's right at your fingertips, who are you at that moment? And if you put yourself, this is another thing I learned from the Japanese. The Japanese place themselves in certain situations. It's very deliberate. And so if you go into that situation and you say, I'm going to make the best fucking image anybody's ever seen, man, if you go in like that, forget it. Because you're going to create an insulated reality that's full of ego, and it's not going to go anywhere. Because the thing that human beings do and need and require is separation from themselves. And there's a beautiful phrase in Hindu culture. It's called darshan. It's used mainly by the people that do the pottery and do all of those kind of manual kinds of things. And darshan means seeing and being seen by God. And you could take the word God. I'm not a big fan of the word God, but you could take that out and substitute anything else in there. Whatever you want to call that thing that's not you, that's outside of you, okay? But it's real. And then they put that together like that. And so they always have a foil. They always have an outside so that their ego doesn't run away with it. You know, Western culture, the ego is so paramount. It's shocking, you know, really. So you've got to always have something to go out. You have to have something that isn't complete. I mean, it's one thing my Zen teacher told me, you know. He said, you know, he pointed out the potters that make those beautiful Japanese bowls. They're kind of wobbly and weird, and they're just unbelievably beautiful. And so we went to a place where the masters were, and we saw these unbelievable things. We were there with my Zen teacher, and we went over to this guy and got a translator to tell us what he was doing. And he explained about the bowl, and then I said, well, why is this one cracked? And then my Zen teacher said, oh, because you need a space for the spirit to go out. So they literally take the bowl that they've been working on for months, and they take an edge of it, and the last thing they do before they do a little prayer is they take the end of it and they crack it. The Ikebana people who do those incredible flower arrangements, when they're done with the very, very last thing that they do, they go up to the twig and they break it. Because you have to have a flaw in it. Because if you don't have a flaw in it, then the ego doesn't come out. You know, you can't do that way. You have to have a place for the spirit to come out. And the spirit to come out simply means that you're going to make a better one next time. You know? Yep. So it kind of keeps moving. And that was just so powerful and so opposite to what I thought that these people were doing until I really saw it with my own eyes.
I think we have time for one more question.
There's one in the back there.
Yep.
So what are the flaws in your work?
What's that?
What are the flaws in your work? How do you crack it?
How do we
How
crack
do you crack your work at the very end?
That's a good point.
Okay, that's a good point. I'll get back to you on that. No.
Let's ask Kira.
You know, I think that what I do is I spend too much time working it, and then I have to stop, and then I just have to put it away, you know, and wait a little bit. Because, and it's funny, my wife and I, Kira, we have two boys, and our older son, Blake, is really also introverted like I was when I was young, and he makes these incredible things, and it's really beautiful to see. I remember one time when he was little, I took him in for the first time to see the Tyrannosaurus Rex in New York at the Museum of I forget what's
Natural history.
Natural history, yeah. And I remember I was like, that's how I knew he came from me and Kira, because I walked him inside and he sees the Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is the star of the whole show, and he just turns like this and he goes this way. And then gradually he went all the way around and then came back to the other side. You know, you kind of don't go at it frontal. You know, Western culture wants to do everything frontal. You know, push it out of the way, you know. You go around, you make a spiral. Spiral's a much better way to go. It's a concentric circle that keeps expanding. And if you're good at what you do, whatever the thing it is you do, it radiates in concentric circles, like throwing a stone in a pond. It fills up this whole room with people's energy, and it keeps going, you know? That's the beauty of it. And then the idea, the basic bottom line of all of what we do is letting go. And that's something that we all have a problem. You know, you make something you feel is the most beautiful thing, and then you want to keep it the really best one, but you shouldn't. You should just, like a child, you know, okay, you're big enough now, just send it on its way, and then you'll make something better, you know? Yeah,
Well,
sure.
Well, Bill, working with you and with Kira on this exhibition has been a really special treat.
Thank you.
And the best part is we all get to look at the works on our own, quietly,
Great.
circularly.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you,
Thank
Kira.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.